Hello, everyone. Welcome to EA Global Summit 2023. This session will be by Ian Mitchell from Ability Engineering in the topic Imports, Implication and Insights, 3 ways to deliver even more business value from your EA data. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Dewey. My name is Ian Mitchell. I've been an EA user since version 3.5, and I really think this is a thing that all speakers should be encouraged to say is which EA release they started with. I've also just realized this week that I've spent 40 years working in the IT industry, which is a bit sad. Anyway, so I've been a business analyst. I was even a project manager for 2 days, a manager of BA teams. I've taught UML, written UML courses, and for the last 12 years, I've been the author of EA Docs, Model Expert, Revision Manager, and Portfolio Manager, which are now part of Teamworks. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. This is a session really which is a journey session. So it's a journey from trying to find a way to help people import data into EA a bit better, and then it kind of morphed into how to creating a kind of a general purpose editor, which was a surprise because the thing that did the import didn't really look like a general purpose editor, but then after a while it kind of did. And then finally, and this is the bit I want to spend the most time on, is so if we have a general purpose editor for EA that doesn't need diagrams, what does this mean for the way we use EA? So a kind of a journey thing. It's worth saying at the start, what are the principles that we use at Ability Engineering when building solutions for people? And these are just a few of them. I'm sure I can think of some more if you feed me enough beer. I think we're talking to modelers, and modelers, in my experience, generally don't know how to write programs. They don't know how to write SQL. They don't like writing scripts, even if they have to. They don't have access to lots and lots of infrastructure. Getting infrastructure changes is hard. So just say, oh, just spin up a web server. Well, that's actually pretty difficult for most people I seem to speak to. And any solution that we can think of needs to work with any kind of modeling language and any kind of modeling style, good, bad, or in between. And I think it's also important that when we say, oh, we'd like people to work in this kind of way, we're not going to try and change everything about how they do stuff. They may be looking at better looking diagrams and better documents and better spreadsheets, but there's no point saying to a stakeholder, oh, no, you don't do things like that anymore. You do it like this instead. Well, most modelers I speak to just don't have that kind of power to tell stakeholders what to do. So we need to meet our stakeholders where they are rather than where we'd like them to be. Also, I think it's important to remember that EA is not the center of the world. I know we're all EA geeks here and we all love geeking out about EA, and I can geek with the best of you. But really, we're just a part of a really big IT world and not the center of it. So we need to play nicely with everything around us. And also, finally, value for money. There's no point in me producing solutions here that cost tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. So let's keep it simple and let's keep it real. So this thing started then with trying to import information into EA. Now, most of you have tried this at some point, I'm sure. And it's hard. It shouldn't be hard, but it really is, because EA kind of expects things to be in nice little regular pieces, nice little boxes, all lined up nicely and all beautiful. What I seem to start off with looks a bit more like this. It's not really very well organized, and it's got all kinds of rubbish in it and things I don't want and things I do want. And the things I do want and don't want are all in together, and it's not at all in the structure that I'd like to see. So I get given stuff like, oh, this kind of a spreadsheet. Here we go, is a nice spreadsheet of some, actually I'm going to use Archimate examples here, not because I'm an Archimate expert, for sure, but just because lots of people are using Archimate these days. So here's an example then of the kind of spreadsheet that I might start out with. So I've got a mixture of, here's my business functions, there's the names and the notes about them, so that's excellent. I've got some other information about other things that each business function is related to. Yeah, that might be a problem because in EA terms, those are going to be different elements and they're going to be linked to my business functions with connectors. I don't really want it all in one place. So, and also I probably have more than one source for my data. So here's my same business functions again, and some extra data about them in a completely different spreadsheet. So this is the kind of world that I'm in. Data from lots of different places, not really in the order that EA wants to see it. Because what EA wants to see is something like this. So here's my little business function, and it's connected. It's connected using some strange kind of Archimate connector things that I have to say, not an Archimate person. I believe those are maybe about right. Apologies to those who know Archimate if they're not right. So what EA wants is a nice load of business roles that I can put here, and a nice load of business functions, and a nice little table here that says, here's how this role relates to that function. A kind of third normal form classic database design. But of course, I don't have that. I've got all my kind of scruffy stuff in tables all over the place. So what can I do? What are my current solutions? Well, Tom O'Reilly spoke earlier on today about the Office MDG, which is great. It does import, export from Excel. It's a bit of a hard thing to use because for each kind of file, each spreadsheet, I need to have a profile that says how I take each piece and map it onto each other piece. And if I get it wrong, I put things in the wrong places, and I just don't find it very simple. And it certainly would be very difficult, I think, to import data from one of those denormalized tables that we looked at a minute ago, where I've got business functions and things that it's related to, but only the names of them. I think it would really struggle with that. My alternative is, and it's one that I've followed many, many times, is write some script. And this is great. If you're a consultant like me, you could make money doing this. So that's good. So when your consultant says, hey, I can do that for you for only $20,000, you go, fantastic. I think the modern expression for that is technical debt. You're creating some code now that if you ever want to rerun it and make a bit of a change, where is the person that wrote it? So I'm not really convinced that writing script is the way forward. Either it means that one of your modelers is going to take time out from writing models and doing their job to learn how to write script, or you're going to hire somebody from the outside, and there's your technical debt. So instead, I thought, well, I'll take something that I already have. We already have the EA Docs Excel interface, which is a bi-directional interface that we've had for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years now. It's been working perfectly fine. What we did was replaced the Excel bit with a spreadsheet control, and we'll see in a second why that's important. But as we did that, because we're now not using Excel, we can make a column smart. We can make it understand. Sometimes it's a tag value, it's an EA field, it's the name of the element, or it's information about something related to the element. I'll come back to that in a minute. And we'll see how you're going to use a simple template to define how you do that. So we've taken what used to be EA Docs and Excel and made it into this thing called eaSheets, which is now part of EA Teamworks. The product bit, by the way, is kind of to the side of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the implication of, if I've got this kind of general editor, so what? But I need to kind of describe what that general editor does before we go too much further. So the first step then in this new world for importing this complicated data into EA is this. First of all, you just create a little example of what you want to see. So here's the element type. I want to import some business functions. I want to import these kinds of things and probably my business objects as well. And also I want to wire this up in this way. So I want that kind of connector here, this kind of connector between the business role and the business function. I can hear Archimate people all over the world going, no, that's wrong. Doesn't matter. It's a thing with a special kind of connector to another thing. So the general stuff. So that's my example of what I want. And I'm going to use that as a template. Hence, I've called them all template this and template that. So, by the way, this is the only time in all that follows that I need to think about connector types. And I'm beginning to see a trend. Well, I say a trend. Nizam and I have come to the same conclusion, which is all these clever connectors are far too complicated. People don't understand them. They don't know what they mean. So how about we just make things simple? So I've got one kind of connector between each thing. Good idea, rather than the 30 that Archimate allows for. And I just don't want people to even know they exist. Certainly not anything about them that's clever. So that's my first step. Here's how I use that template. So I open what we call a smart sheet. So this is this is a spreadsheet control. So here's my EA and here's my control embedded inside of it. We used to do this years ago with EA Docs and Excel, and then Microsoft changed how Excel worked. But we're back. So here's my really smart sheet. So it's got a whole bunch of stuff I can do with it, which we probably won't have time to do. But let's just look in more detail about what it's just imported. So it said, here's my package. Here's my template business function. Oh, add some notes, please. I've got a stereotype, a couple of tag values, and all of these extra things that I need to create connectors to other objects. So, and we can see, if we're really feeling technical, that that's a triggering relationship to a business process, and this is an assignment to a business role, and you get the idea. So this is now a kind of row 0 of the spreadsheet I'm going to use to import my data. So this, so far, I'm feeling pretty pleased with this. So here we go. So there's my my spreadsheet, and I can now copy and paste from all my different spreadsheets all over the place. Because let's face it, copying and pasting is not hard. It's a spreadsheet, so you can do stuff like word wrap and changing widths of columns and that kind of stuff. We have disabled quite a lot of this stuff because it makes a mess of the data, but there's still lots of good spreadsheet function there. So here's me, I'm copying and pasting stuff and having a good time. Everybody's favorite function in a spreadsheet, yeah, the drag copy kind of thing. You can still use the drag and renumber stuff as well. So there you go. So there's all my data imported. Save it into EA. Nice bright green color says, yep, I've created all that stuff. That's it. So what the heck happened there then? So what it did was, it's created a bunch of new elements. It's given them a description. It's given them these tag values, and it's created links to other elements. So if it's gone and looked for a business process that's called new policy issuance, and it's created a triggering relationship to it. And it's done the same thing with the risk assessment business process and premium collection and so on. So if it finds an element with the correct name, it'll create a connector to it. So that's good. If it finds multiple things with exactly the same name in the model, it won't create a connector to both of them, because that'd be crazy, and it'll throw an error because you've got a crazy model with multiple things with exactly the same name, stereotype, and type. It might also find things. It might also go looking for something and not find it. So I think the underwriting guidelines doesn't exist in the model. There is no business object called underwriting guidelines. And I don't think there's a business role called claims, I think that says adjuster. In that case, it's going to create an element and then create a connector to that element. I can prove that because here's what it actually has produced for me. Again, doing this in a video sort of sense. So remember, I had my new business functions. I only put the business function in there. So here, I'll stop the thing there. So here's the 1, 2, 3, 4 new business functions I created. That's what I actually want to create. I've also created links to lots of the other objects, processes, and roles, but I never found claims adjuster. So I've created a role for it, and I've created a business object called underwriting guidelines. It's kind of clever, isn't it? But it's importantly clever. If I then did a re-import of the same data, then I'll get exactly the same result. I won't create duplicate connectors because it checks for duplicate connectors, and I won't create any new data. So I can, if my data has been updated with more stuff, it'll just gradually increase the data more and more, and I don't have to do it all in one great big import, which I kind of like. I like to create a little bit of data and then a bit more and a bit more, and it feels a bit more friendly. So we'll roll this a bit further forward. So, and I'm going to do a bit of a tidy up, I think. I'm going to take my business functions and put them where they belong, my claims adjuster business roles and all the other roles, my underwriting guideline. Excuse me drinking my tea, but it is tea time in the UK. And there we go. I'm ready to start doing it again. So a nice, easy way of taking highly denormalized data with bits and pieces from all over the place and importing it into AA, just using that little diagram that said, I've got a template, got other things I need with the right connectors. So I think we've really got to make this thing as simple as possible if people are going to use it. So having built that, we then thought there's probably more we can do here. We can do things like, how about make it into a general purpose editor of EA stuff? I can add rows, obviously. I can just copy it, say I want an activity with a new name and a stereotype and a description, and I can add new elements into it. I can delete elements. Now, I don't know about you, but I sometimes find that difficult to delete them from the right places. So we make it a little bit difficult by saying you have to type the word delete into there to delete something, which seems the polite way to do things. What else can we do? If you delete the contents of that cell, because that's the cell that says this litigation management function links via a triggering link connector, to fraud detection. If I delete that, what do you expect to happen? Well, I certainly don't delete fraud detection as a business process, clearly, but I do delete the connector. I do warn you if I'm about to delete connectors, because that's just polite, isn't it? So I can delete connectors and I can create connectors as well, because if I just type the name of a thing, or I just say add related element and actually go and pick the element in the EA browser, then I can add connections to stuff. I can show tag values, obviously. If I put a new column in here, and give it a name up there, then I can create a brand new tag value that didn't previously exist for all of those element types, which is kind of neat. And a whole bunch of other sorty, filtery, export to Excel, import from Excel kind of stuff, which you'd probably expect. So that's my general purpose editor. I'll prove to you how the connector thing works, just in case there are some distrustful people out there. So here's my litigation management object. There you go. It's got a link to that, a link to this. Let's go and link it to something else just to prove to you that it really works. So add a related element, pick something, I don't know, customer profile. And there you go. Better save it, otherwise EA won't know. Yeah, done all the save. So this is the funny bit of EA, isn't it here? I'll just stop this for a second. So EA, this is one of the best bits of EA for me, is add related elements. And it's great. If I do it now, it will faithfully put on all the related elements. If I added another one in the spreadsheet, I'd have to remember to go to my litigation management diagram and add related elements again, which I probably wouldn't do. And we're going to come back to that later because it turns out to be really important. Because the diagram now that I've got, if I added another business object that I access, if I add something else, that diagram is now wrong. And it's not obviously wrong because it looks like a perfectly lovely diagram. But a new connector exists that's just like some of the other ones, but it's just not on the diagram because the diagram is dumb. It only has what we put onto it. Remember that. It's going to become important a bit later on. Oh, final thing. I want to validate the data that I've just imported. So here's another massive spreadsheet full of more cleverer business functions with even more links to even more things. So I need a really quick way of validating that this data is correct. So structurally correct, remember. I mean, it may be rubbish, but is it structural rubbish? So we use something you probably know about already, Model Expert. It has reference models inside it that describe what other relationships are that are allowed and which tagged values you need, what the values of those tagged values can be, the kind of stuff you find in an MDG. In fact, reference models can be made from MDGs. So we use Model Expert and we just annotate the spreadsheet to say, look, here's what's wrong, and the little pop-ups that go, oh, this is wrong, and it zips you off to your intranet, which will then say, oh, look, this is why this is wrong, and here's how you fix it all. So it's all nicely linked together to encourage people to do the right stuff. But hey, no diagram. And yet, Model Expert has been validating diagrams with these kind of rules for 5 years. This is using exactly the same information in Model Expert that says what's allowed and what's not allowed, and it's applying it to a spreadsheet, which is kind of friendly, isn't it? So some of the errors in here are things like cost efficiency looks like it should be high, medium, and low, and some idiots put V high in there. Well, that's a simple mistake. That's missing. Something missing here maybe. Looks to me like I need to have something in that field. That's got two things in it. My guess is it should only have one. There are pop-ups that tell you about all this stuff. And what on earth are these two out here? Well, somebody's just linked up a business function to a business object using the wrong kind of connector. So it's an abstraction instead. So that's just wrong. So I can import the data, I can edit it, I can add connectors, delete connectors. So there's a whole lot of stuff I can do without using any diagrams. So the import element stuff, yeah, fine, and fields and tag values, pretty straightforward. I've always found the connector part of data import very difficult. But now I think I can see a way that eaSheets, which is the thing we use to do all this, is enough to create, read, update, delete connectors and elements and all the bits of elements, and can validate that it's correct, all of which I can do without any diagrams. So what do we do that? Oh, I had a question from Martin saying, time-aware modeling, multiple versions of the same element. Yeah, well, I wouldn't do it that way. If you use Portfolio Manager to do it, it will subtly rename every element that you clone, put a little asterisk at the end of it to differentiate it from the original, as well as linking back to it. So actually, you wouldn't get a namespace collision. So if we've got a gadget like this, if we've got something that will do editing of all this data without diagrams, what does that mean for how we use EA or what we can do with it? Because EA is a visual modeling tool, okay? That's, when you open the box, it's a visual modeling tool. It's the best visual modeling tool. It's the cheapest. It's just the best all-round modeling tool. But it's visual, isn't it? It's all about diagrams. But is it? And I've decided this year I'm going to say something a bit more controversial than normal. I'm imagining, and this got me thinking, having built the import thing and built the editor, so what about diagrams then? So my desk here is completely full of bits of paper going, well, what's the role of diagrams in this new world? Well, I'm starting to think of it as being a spectrum now of diagrams, from the useful to the not very useful. The useful end is easy. These are the diagrams that I started doing in EA, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, a long, long time ago. Excuse me. You cannot imagine representing that information except in a diagram. It's essential. It gives you a visual kind of feel of where the responsibilities are. It just is inconceivable without a diagram. Similarly, some kind of a process flow, business process activity diagram thing. It's all about the spatial layout and grouping things into swim lanes and stuff. So really, they're useful. They're not useful, they're essential. For me, they're at that far left-hand side of absolutely, utterly essential diagrams. Don't even imagine doing that without a diagram. But as you look at the other kinds of diagrams that we draw, I think it's not so obvious to me. And thinking about this made me imagine, if I put this into a spreadsheet, would it be any good? So here's another kind of diagram. Personal favorite. Anybody who's been on one of my UML courses know I go crazy mad about state models because I love them, because I think they give really deep insight into behavior. Could I do that in a spreadsheet? Probably not. I like the idea of being able to organize them to help people to understand what I'm doing. And because that's the game that we're in, isn't it? We're about putting across this information to other people and making sure it's right in itself, but putting it across. So I think a state diagram or a state model without any state diagrams would be weird. But knowing which element, which state leads to which other state, yeah, I'm not really convinced. Now we get into some other kinds of diagrams, and I think it's interesting that as I go to the right-hand side of this kind of spectrum, these get less behavioral and more structural. We can discuss this later. Could I imagine this kind of diagram, a general purpose kind of ERD, conceptual data model kind of thing? Can I imagine that in a spreadsheet? Well, actually, yeah, because now this is probably incomplete, is one of the things I can say almost certainly is there are probably other kinds of classes elsewhere that I just choose not to show on this diagram. So it could be a bit misleading. On the other hand, I can arrange things in a spatial order that would help people understand it. So, but I'm less convinced about those. Personal favorite again for UML diagrams is a use case diagram. And I've been teaching people this for, I don't know, since UML was invented, which was the late 90s, so a very, very long time ago. And the first time when we built the eaSheets function, I looked at one of these and thought, do I really need one of those, one of these diagrams, if I could just say, open me all these use cases in a sheet and say, well, here's a column for the stakeholders, and actually, what else am I? This is one, by the way, from the Sparks example, which bizarrely uses this invokes link between these two. I kid you not, this is straight from EA example. I don't know what they were smoking that day. But could I imagine that in a spreadsheet? And I think, actually, yeah, I can. I can imagine that I might draw one or two use case diagrams if I've got a really big model. And really big here, I mean hundreds and hundreds of use cases. It might save me some time now to not draw most use case diagrams everywhere, but just take things out of the model and look at it in a spreadsheet. And I can probably get more value there by checking, is this connected to that? Does it have the right information in it? So we're getting towards the kind of the middle ground here of, yeah, I could go either way here. At the towards the right-hand side come diagrams like this. Now, I'm not a big Archimate fan. Okay, there's probably some kind of support group I can join that says I'm not an Archimate fan. Hi, my name's Ian and I don't really like Archimate. It's just too damn complicated. It really is. And I've seen so many diagrams like this that people show me and go, isn't this great, Ian? I go, I have no idea. It could be brilliant. It could be rubbish. I can't tell. And then they try and explain all the bits to me, and then the following day they carry on trying to explain to me what it means. It's just too hard. I just don't think they serve a purpose. One or two maybe in a model, but let's not go crazy producing diagrams like this and expect that people are going to go, whoa, you are the best modeler. They do have a purpose, sorry, my mistake. They're what I call look at me diagrams. So I can print this kind of diagram out and I can stick it on the wall behind my desk if I have a real desk, or maybe put it on the little background that I put on my Zoom calls, and people go, wow, Ian can draw diagrams like that. He must be smart. So that's a good use case for it. It's not one that's going to sell very well, I don't think. But these are just too hard. One or two, maybe I hand draw them, but am I going to draw these such that every element appears in the right place in multiple diagrams? I don't think so. I just don't think I have that kind of time. Not in the sizes of models that I'm starting to see, where there are hundreds of business functions and there are many hundreds of business objects and business processes. These things do not scale into diagrams at all well. So every diagram now is a sort of some kind of super customized view. So I'm putting those further to the right. So what's in the extra space then? Least favorite EA diagram, probably. Why do I need a requirements diagram? I don't think I do. I mean, these are kind of weird relationships anyway. This is made up of those. Okay, well, that's simple hierarchy, isn't it? I can look at that in a tree view. I don't need anything clever to look at that. And frankly, this is totally exotic modeling. Mostly with requirements, I want a nice spreadsheet interface to manage it really easily. So I'm putting those way at the right-hand side. Somebody's asked the question, why using the spreadsheet integrated into Sparks rather than Excel? What can't Excel do this plugin can? Take ER, whoever you are, I'll do that another day. Almost everything is the answer. And finally, my least favorite kind of diagram that I see in lots of models. And that's diagrams like this, which say it's probably a child diagram of the insurance product development business function, maybe. Anyway, whatever that element is, this is probably a child of it, a child diagram of it. And worse still, it's probably been generated by some bit of script or some smart person who's written some clever script to say, oh, well, we'll put that in the middle and then we'll put any of those roles at the top and we'll put the business objects on the left side. And I've seen some fantastic bits of script that do this kind of stuff, because you have to run it 400 times because you've got 400 of these and you produce 400 little tiny diagrams, which are immediately out of date. Because unless you've got also a mechanism of refreshing all 600 of them, whenever anybody adds a link here or a link there or delete, remember EA will handle delete, that will appear and its connection will have gone, so that's good. But if I put another process up here with another link, that diagram is out of date unless I keep refreshing all 600 of them. So awful, because I only really use this to say, give me a view of this thing and its next door neighbors. And I could probably use the traceability view in EA and get more or less the same information. Probably more than I need, because it's going to start showing me all these clever different kinds of connectors and things which I really don't care about. So I'm putting that in what I'm calling architecture maintenance kind of diagrams. Diagrams that I don't really want to use. I don't want Prolaborate to start having to suck these in and display them in Prolaborate, because it's far too hard. I'm probably never going to put them into a document, because why would I? I could just put it as a textual table instead. So I've got this strange range of different kinds of diagram, from the absolutely essential, it's a process diagram, it's a sequence diagram, it's got to be in EA, and it's got to be as a diagram, through to the far end of little piddly stupid diagrams that I may have hundreds or even thousands of them just to help me maintain stuff that doesn't really belong in diagrams. So how do I treat with these? How do I think about them as a group? Well, to me, on the left-hand side, particularly with things like process and sequence diagram, the diagram really is the truth. If I miss a swim lane, what are they called? The vertical things in a sequence diagram. If I miss out one of those, then the diagram's wrong. It's got a big hole in the middle, and it'll be obvious that I've just made a mistake. Sequence diagram's the same. It's very difficult to imagine a process diagram where I miss something out. So the diagram really is the truth. Otherwise, it makes no sense at all. For the stuff at the other end, it's very much a view of the truth and entirely optional. Don't get me wrong here. If you think there is value in creating an architecture diagram or a requirements diagram or something like that to illustrate a very particular point, to clarify for a particular stakeholder, draw a diagram. And my general purpose editor should make that very easy. I take the bits that I want to see in my diagram and I throw them on the diagram. EA creates all the connectors for me, fantastic. And if I'm really lucky, it'll lay the diagram out in some sensible way. More often it won't look very sensible, but I'll pretty quickly be able to organize it and go, there you go, there's a diagram that illustrates that point. But it's a view of the truth, it's not the truth. The model is the truth, and a spreadsheet is much closer to looking at the model than it is to look at than a diagram does. So at that end, I hope the direction here makes sense. I can't really tell. At this end, the useful end, I just stick to using diagrams and properties of things and list specification views, regular EA stuff, business as usual. It's at the other end where the data doesn't have a natural kind of flow to it, isn't spatial organization of it isn't really helping me very much. That, I think, is where you need this kind of general purpose editor. So we've looked at the importing, the implications. So if I have such a general editor, then what price my diagrams? What does that mean? So this is the kind of the last bit, how we're doing for time. Not too bad. I want to leave some time for questions. So if I don't have any of these kind of maintenance diagrams or viewpoints, as Archimate calls them, and I just have sheets instead, I just open a sheet on a whole bunch of business functions or business roles, then I don't have to create the diagrams. I don't have to keep them refreshed. I don't have to keep them refreshed. And I can keep validating them all the time, so I can get more done with less effort and greater accuracy. So that's all good. The other thing I can do is when we look at some of those spreadsheets, it wasn't absolutely clear that you needed to know what kind of connector existed between the different pieces, was it? We put a little bit in the heading at the top just for the geeks amongst us, but I didn't really need to know. I just typed in the name of a thing and created a connection to it. That was easy. So it makes this kind of information, the non-diagrammatic information, much more accessible to different kind of stakeholders. So there's a bunch of people now who would probably use an interface like this that would never dream of using Enterprise Architect and drawing these funky diagrams with their clever little links between stuff and pop-ups and quick linkers and all that stuff. People find that very scary about EA because they don't know it. Yeah, to know it is to love it. But selling that to new people is hard. So saying, hey, look, here's a spreadsheet. Just fill in the bits that you know, and we'll figure out the rest with you. I'll take a copy of it into Excel, give it to somebody who knows, get them to type in the right names, bring it back. Easy. At no point do I have to know what Archimate means or what an Archimate triggering connector means. And that, I think, brings me to that kind of realization at the end of this kind of journey for me, which was, hey, if I can do that, what other kinds of data can I put into EA that I couldn't do before? Well, in a way, Archimate and architecture modeling languages like that are an experiment in that they are new kinds of data that EA was never designed to do. And the fact that EA has managed to allow us to put Archimate things and Zachman and all those kinds of stuff into EA is a tribute to EA is a flexible tool. It does the job. But I think there's more kinds of stuff we can put into EA if we don't have to invent a diagram that I have to draw and put things in the right places and connect in the right way. If it's just a spreadsheet and I fill it in, easy. So what does that let me do? While you're thinking about that, something that Jackie spotted this morning was I have a bunch of people who are currently spreadsheet users. I can get these people now into the EA world a lot easier than I could if they had to draw diagrams. So might they go the next step and go, rather than maintaining all your data in loads of spreadsheets in Excel in your own little world, why not use this spreadsheet here, which is nice and simple. It's got just the data that you need. It's got columns that you understand, and you can add rows and you can add columns and you can select things and you can sort and filter and stuff. In fact, it's actually quite a usable interface. So why don't you use that to master some piece of data rather than doing it externally and then I have to import it and then reconcile all the changes and all that sort of stuff? So maybe I could reduce my volume of imports and have people mastering stuff in EA that maybe didn't do it before. And with all the spare time I've got, I can now just draw diagrams where it really helps people to understand what's going on. And always in those diagrams, making them say, I'm just a view. If you want to make sure that I'm using the most up-to-date data, then here's what you have to do. So deliberate repeat here of that last bullet, which is, what else can I now do? There must be more stuff I can now put into EA that I couldn't do before. If I now don't have lots of diagrams, maybe there's ways of looking at that data that isn't a spreadsheet, but also isn't a diagram. The kinds of stuff that Nizam and his team do in Collaborate. So they pull stuff out of the EA repository and do funky graphs and charts and all kinds of great stuff that let me look at the data in different ways and give me new insights. Why do I have to buy Collaborate to do that? What if I'm not able to do that? Remember at the beginning in our principles, we said, it's not always possible for me to install a web server or get a SaaS solution. It may be just too hard. So why, as a regular EA user like me, why can't I have access to Nizam's kind of funky views? I don't want diagrams, remember. I want to look at the view and have it update every time I look at it and then throw it away. Which leads me on to the next thing is, who can write me an extension for a kind of temporary EA diagram that says, take the latest data, build me a diagram, lay it out in some kind of predictable way, and delete it when I'm done. Delete it when I've finished reading it. Or maybe auto-refresh it. Now, I seem to remember that Geert Bellikens from Belgium did something about this. So if anybody remembers how to do that, please let me know, because I'm sure back of my mind an auto-refreshing diagram is a thing. No, let's have more of that, please. And finally, because something has to pay the bills, go and have a look at this thing. It's called eaSheets. It's delivered as part of the EA Teamworks. EA Teamworks now delivers you eaSheets, EA Docs, Model Expert, Revision Manager, and soon to be Portfolio Manager as well. And it's $99 a year per user. So I'll take some questions, I think. Question from Andrew. Is this where simpler diagrams like those in Prolaborate come in? Yes, it is. Well, no, it's not, because Prolaborate isn't drawing diagrams in the EA sense. Because I think we have to define our terms here. For me, a diagram is a fixed thing in the Sparks repository, and it's got particular elements in particular positions with particular kinds of connectors visible. What Prolaborate does is not that. It creates completely different views, and they're strict views. They don't, you can filter what you see, but they're built right now from the very latest data. So they're always up to date. So that's the big difference between a diagram and I think what Prolaborate does. Prolaborate gives me new views that let me look at my data in new and interesting ways. So that's why it's valuable. That's what it's good at. Do I have a trial demo for EA Docs? Yeah, the whole EA Teamwork suite, which is now a single add-in with all of those tools, is available from eateamworks.com with a free 30-day download. And then when you buy licenses, you only buy licenses for the bits you need. So, and then you can keep trialing. I think I'm done. Thank you.